Alright, hello and welcome back to the Electric Knight Workshop. We are going to be getting back into the 1/35th scale Knight of Gold. Going to be starting it properly here. Now, the first thing that you're going to want to do whenever you do a resin kit is you're going to do a parts check, but I already did that before I recorded the unboxing video, so everything's all good in there. Now, what we're going to do to get things started here is we're going to get all of our parts organized and we're going to cut out all the parts runners that we need. So if we go ahead and open our instructions here, we can see that our first section that we're going to be working with is the foot. So we're going to go ahead and get all those parts cut out, and we are going to be sorting them by left and right. Alright, getting back into the parts here, we got the foot first. As you can see, this is marked as right. Everything looks like it's intact in there. Good. Alright, so we're going to get our toes and the rear ankle weight. Go ahead and get our part sheet and start getting those cut out. Alright, first sheet, got our rear ankle weight there. And get that cut out. Getting my nippers here. These are pretty thick tabs, they're a little awkward to cut out. Kind of almost break off the runner rather than snap off. Pretty awkward. Almost. There we go. Alright, got the ankle weight out. Get our other part sheet here. We got the toes for each foot. These are even thicker. Use my other nippers here. There we go. Much easier. Much easier. Alright, so set that back down with my nippers here. These basic ones, my blue handled ones, they're good for small tabs, so we'll not really use those. These green handled ones are for metal, and they cut through these big tabs like butter, so we'll definitely make sure to use those. Much easier to cut these out. And up next, we have the leg parts. Gonna be working with these. Got the upper leg, lower leg, and we are going to need to go through and get all these little trim pieces. So we'll go ahead and get that started. Get the first part sheet here. There's a knee, or a kneecap, I should say. These side flaps on the lower leg. Left and right. And the ankles next. Second part sheet. This part's really heavy. Makes it very awkward to cut. Got those. There's that one. And the next, right there. Perfect. Now we just need the centerpiece. Fish for that real quick. And there we go. That's all the parts for one leg. Alright, moving on to the arms now. We got the main arm section itself, arm armor, the lower arm, and we have these two little parts that need to cut out, so pretty simple. But what's not simple is the hand. So we're going to get these hand parts out. As you can see, there's quite a few parts. So the way it's split up is we have straight fingers, curled fingers, and very curled fingers. And the way that those work on the instructions is the straight fingers, the first two, curled, and then very curled for the pinky. So we'll go ahead and get those parts cut out. Make sure I got the right side. Right hand, right, yes, we're getting that one. So cut out our right hand. There's that. Then we're going to get two fingers, straight ones. Snap that off, a little easier. There we go. And, oh, oops, still need that. Cut out our curled finger. And finally, our very curled finger for the pinky. There. And that's everything for the arms. Now we're moving on to the shoulders. As you can see, they're pretty simple, just 2 shoulder pads that go on the upper arm there. So one thing to keep in mind is there's a note for the left shoulder, the marking that says AKD Knight of Chitin D. That is going to be for the left shoulder. We're working with the right, so we only need these parts, and they just slot on right here, just like that. And that's it. Pretty simple. That's it for the shoulder parts. Alright, now we're getting to the fun part. We get to do the lower body. So we got to get all these rear pieces done. Get them all cut out. Starting things out, we got the tail armor, got the skirt armor, and we got the lower body. And almost forgot to grab the rear tail weight, fish that out, put it up there. There we go. So we just need to get this little tail skirt armor piece cut out. Grab that. Very inopportune place for a tab. You don't break anything here. And there we go. It was a little scary, but we got it cut out. And that's it for the lower body. Okay, now we have the chest. So we just need to get all these back parts cut out. This one already fell off in the bag. So we're going to get the rest of these here. Got the outer shoulder blade parts first. There's 1, there's 2. Get the back plate cut out. And our other inner shoulder blade piece. There we go. And that's it for the upper chest. Alright, moving on to the rest of the body here. Still got the chest, got the lower body sitting right here. We're going to have the front cod piece, that goes right there. There's these 2 side parts that the side skirts mount onto. Got the side skirts themselves. There we go. And that means we just need to get the rest of these little pieces off here. Cool. So first things first, we got the tail stabilizer links right here. Go right there. We're going to leave these as is because they're fragile. I don't want to break anything, so we'll just set them aside for now. Moving on, we got the sword sheaths right there. And we got these little guys right here. These are going to be the first parts for the sword mounts. There we go. And next, got the sword hilts themselves. There is our cockpit hatch cover. Got the other parts for the sword mounts right there. Okay, that's it for that sheet. Set that aside. Got our second sheet here. Got that other part for the cockpit hatch. And we got these ends of the tail stabilizers there. They're in a very awkward shape. Try and get them cut out safe and sound. There we go. Got them cut out without breaking anything. That's good. And we got these vents that go on the side of the chest. More big tabs. There we go. Okay, we just got that one piece left. And that's going to be it for the body. Okay, finally finishing things up. Got the head. Got the main head piece right here. There's the back of the head with the tails on it. There's the rear head part right there. If you look close, you can see that there's a second face on the back of the head. It's kind of a cool little detail. Got the sides of the head right here, left and right. There's the head frame. we got the face mask. And finally, we have this piece right here. That is going to be the Fatima cockpit cover. Snap that out. And that is it. All of our parts are cut out. Now we can organize. Now that we got everything all cut out, we can go ahead and start sorting our parts. This is a thing that I like to do. Just make sure these small parts don't get lost or misplaced. So we got a Ziploc bag with what the section is labeled on there. We are going to go ahead and put all of our small parts inside. Just make sure nothing gets lost or broken. There we go. I'm not too worried about the big parts here, because they are not going to fit inside these bags, and they're not really going to get lost, so I think it's okay to just kind of set them aside for now. So we're going to go ahead and do that with all the sections, and then we can move on to cleaning. Alright, so now that we got everything all sorted, we are going to need to go through and clean all these parts up. Just one thing I did beforehand, these right and left markings were a little dull, so I marked them with Sharpie just to make them a little easier to read. So went ahead and did that. Now, to get things started with the actual cleaning process here, we got these tabs that are left over from cutting the parts out right. So we need to get rid of these because it'll affect the parts fitting together. Can't have that. So we're going to clean them up. A tool that I like to use primarily for this is a coarse grit file. So we're just going to take it, gently rub it across, clean it up. However, safety precaution first. Before we get started, you're going to want to wear a mask whenever you're working with resin. Always, always, always. Resin dust is very bad for your lungs, so we don't want to breathe that in. So you are always going to want to wear a mask whenever you're working with a resin kit. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on real quick before we get started. Then we're just going to take our file, gently go in one direction, clean it up. Alright, and there we go. Tab's all gone. I'm just going to do it with all these other parts. So another thing to keep in mind is some tabs might not be evident when you first look at them. This section right here, that's a tab right there. We got our detail right there for the actual piece, and this is our tab on top right here, so all this needs sanded away. So we're going to take our file, just work on it bit by bit. Okay, and once we get it all filed away, I'm going to take a little sanding sponge right here, just buff out the rest of it, to make sure we have a nice clean surface. Nothing's left over. And there we go. See the difference? Got big tab right there, all cleaned up, nice and pretty. Alright, another good thing to do periodically is clean up your mess. You're going to have all this dust and chunks of resin flying around from cutting and sanding. So a good thing to have is a little desktop vacuum here. I picked this up from Amazon for like 20-30 bucks. It was very inexpensive. But as you can see, it's just making short work of all this dust and all these little resin chunks I got flying around here. This battery's rechargeable too, so it's very convenient. So with everything all cleaned up, got a nice clean workspace again. So this is a very handy thing to have. Alright, every now and then, you might come across a tab with a really inopportune placement. See how it's next to these two areas right here? If I were to take my file and start filing, I damage this area right here. We don't want that. So to make things easier, we have a little oscillating sanding tool, otherwise known as a sanding pen. Just turn it on, and as you can see, it's going to sand everything while causing very little movement. It's going to do all the work for us. So as you can see, it's a very tedious process, but it's going to beat damaging this area right here and having to fix it all up. So just keep on doing that until it's all gone. Alright, keep at it. You will eventually have a nice smooth surface here. So we have a little tiny divot right here that we need to fix, but that's not a big deal. We can just patch it up later. Should be pretty simple to fix, so just keep on plugging along. Cool. With everything sanded off, we can check and see that everything fits together as it should. There we go. Now, we're just kind of doing a soft test fit here. Nothing's going to hold together. That's way too heavy and there's no solid connection, but just going through, checking, make sure everything's good. Good. Got the ankle here. No, it's not the right side. Oops. Side. There we go. All right, cool. Set that one aside for now. Figure it out later. Got the side flaps here. Whoops. There we go. Cool. So, kind of floppy, but everything fits together as it should. Slots together at least. So, that's nice. Set that down. Let's see what we got here. What is your deal? Got that one. Oh. Well, I guess I see what the problem is. Okay, I just realized I goofed up a little bit. Got these ankle parts here. Sure I got the right one. No, not that one. There we go. This one fits on properly, but this one does not. This is the right piece. So this one is for the left leg. We need to fix that. And we're going to need to file this one down instead. Great. Alright, now that I have the right side here, you can see that everything fits together as it should. Perfect. And with that, the legs have their tabs all sanded. Now we can move on to our next step of the process here. Now, when it comes to working on resin kits, a common thing you're going to run into is what's called a mold line. You can see it's marked on this piece right here. So how this happens is the resin kits, the mold squeezes together, resin's poured in, and this creates a little gap sometimes that lets these little lines form between the parts. So usually they'll be marked, but sometimes you'll run into some that aren't really marked, so you might have to eyeball them a bit. But we're going to need to sand this all away so we can have a nice smooth surface for paint. So we're going to work on that. In tight areas, I have this little Display sanding pen here. Comes in handy for the small tight spots. Got some 180 grit sandpaper on here. We'll just let it do its thing. This one's really stubborn. So, as you can see, I got a little bit more I got to work at here. So we'll just keep on working on it off camera, and we'll get the rest of the part clean. Be right back. Okay, after a lot of sanding and a lot of work, finally we got this part all cleaned up. This is very tedious, but as you can see, it makes for a nice, clean, smooth surface. So we're going to go through and do this on all the rest of the parts, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, So I'm still working on these parts here, getting everything sanded, but it's getting kind of monotonous. I've only got the legs and some of these head parts sanded, so I figured I'd switch things up and start working on scribing. Now, I mentioned this in the unboxing video, but what scribing is you are going to be taking a tool such as this scriber right here, and you're going to be using the blade to dig the details out bit by bit. Now, looking over here, you can see this headpiece right here that I've been working on. I got this side scribed out, and if you look at this neck brace right here, you can see these channels are nice and deep, but if you compare it to the other side, these details are pretty shallow. So with scribing, we're going to be digging these details out, making them nice and deep. Now, this is a twofold benefit. Through scribing, we're going to make these details nice and defined, and when we get to our panel lining process, where we use panel lining fluid, it's going to have a lot more surface area for that fluid to run through. Now, if the lines were still shallow, the fluid would just spill out everywhere, and we would just erase the fluid out of there. So it's essential that we get these lines dug out. Now, scribing is kind of an art. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's not so bad once you get used to it. Really, you just need to let the blade do all the work. So you're going to hold this at about a 45-degree angle to the line you're digging through. And you're just going to start very gently, let the sharpness of the blade do the work, and just progressively dig through. And once you get a few lines in and you get some more depth on the line, you can start adding a little bit more pressure, but you don't want to add so much pressure you gouge the part. So as you can see, we've dug that part out a little bit, much deeper now. Now the edges are going to be a little rough when you scribe, so if you take a little bit of a sanding sponge or some sandpaper, soften things up. And there we go, line's a lot deeper now, nice and clean. So this is a pretty monotonous process. Even just on this piece, there's a ton of lines that need work through, but this is a very essential step to a professional looking model. So we're going to be doing this on every single part, and that is basically how you scribe. Okay, another important skill to have is being able to patch parts up. You're going to run into this periodically on resin kits, because despite being a very hard substance, resin is actually very brittle. So you're going to encounter breakages on thin parts. If we look at this foot right here, for instance, if we look at this side right here, it's nice and flat and sharp. On the other side, we got all these little chunks and a little gouge in there too. So we need to be able to patch that up. The easiest way is with UV resin, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a resin that you cure up with a UV light, which is this little guy right here. You just hit it with the light, and it'll harden and cure up. Pretty simple. Now, with this edge being fine and sharp, you figure it might be a very delicate and difficult to fix part, but if we work smart, not hard, it's actually not very hard to do at all. So we'll just take some Tamiya masking tape, just made specifically for models. Just stick it right on the back. Make sure it's nice and flat so nothing runs underneath. So we're just trying to fix up that edge. And you can see everything is pretty clearly marked now what we need to fix, and this serves as a backing. So we're going to use some UV resin. Put it on a little toothpick here. Just a little bit, we don't need much. And then we'll just dab it right into the area that we need to fix. And it's sticky enough that it'll just stick right to the resin, which is just what we want. There we go. Then we'll hit it with our pen light. There we go. And then this takes about 20-30 seconds for it to really cure up, at least to the point that you can work with it. Make sure you get the whole area. Go. That's one spot done. Move on to the next one. We'll do these one at a time. Dab the resin on there. There we go. Fix that gouge now. Just dab it in, fill it in. It's a little bit more. If you get too much, it's not so bad. It's better to have too much than not enough. There we go, now it's filled in. And just hit the light. Might need to hit this a little bit longer because it's a little bit thicker. A little bit closer. Go. That's 2 areas done. Moving on to this bottom one. You need to be careful with this one because this is right next to a little recessed detail, so we don't want to get any resin inside that little detail there. So slowly work it in. If we need to layer it up, we can do that. That's not a problem. So start out with that. Cure it up. A little bit more, there we go. And probably use a little bit more. It's not a problem. Just don't want it to be too shallow. A little bit more. We'll dab it on top of that resin that we just cured. We stick to that as well. Make sure you get right up to that edge there. There we go. Now it's right at the edge. Cure it again. There we go. Alright, we got that one done. Now, I noticed when I was doing these other sections, the rear corner's also broken a bit too, so we gotta fix that up. Just right on that edge there, dab it in. There we go. Man, this part is a mess. I can't believe I didn't notice this when I was unboxing. A little bit more. Make sure it's built up properly. There we go. Cure this final little bit right here. And then we'll just move down the whole part back and forth one more time. Just to make sure everything else gets hit properly. Up. One more for good measure. There we go. Alright, everything cured up. You can slowly peel the tape back. This is masking tape for models, so it shouldn't be that sticky. Just want to be kind of gentle with it though. And once it comes off, here we go. Peel it off, and we have a new edge. Looks like kind of a mess, but we're going to go ahead and get it sanded down and cleaned up, and then we'll have that part all fixed. Be right back. Right, after a lot of careful sanding and cleaning, we finally have a fixed edge. It doesn't quite look 100% fixed right now, but once we get some primer on there, you should see that this all blends in right here. Now, if there's still any defects left, we can always sand and reprime. It's kind of half the purpose of primer is checking for defects anyways. So we'll see if anything needs fixed up and go from there. But that's how you fix things with UV resin. Alright, I think that should just about do it for now. We covered all the basics here today. Now, I'm not going to bore you guys with everything else that I still need to do to these parts. I'm just going to be doing everything that I covered in this part on every single other piece that I need to do. So it's going to be a while before the next part comes out, but I'll go over pinning and test fitting next to make sure everything fits together properly. So we'll see you in the next part, and take care until then.